On a quiet morning in a small town in the UK, the day began like any other. Cars moved slowly along the roadside, people heading to work, school runs in progress, and the usual sound of life carrying on without interruption. Nothing seemed unusual at first glance. But sometimes, the most unforgettable moments in life begin in the most ordinary ways. On the edge of a narrow country road, something small was sitting completely still. It was a dog, a brown and white mixed breed, medium-sized, with tired eyes that kept watching every passing vehicle. The dog wasn't running. It wasn't barking. It was simply waiting, as if it expected someone to return at any moment. But no one did. This is the emotional story of how a dog was abandoned on the roadside, and how what happened next shocked everyone who later found out the truth. A strange silence on the roadside. As the morning moved forward, people began noticing the dog. A few slowed down their cars. Some looked through their windows. Others simply drove past, thinking someone else would deal with it. In a world where everyone is busy, it is easy to ignore what doesn't fit into our routine. The dog remained in the same place. No collar movement. No attempt to chase cars. Just silence and confusion in its eyes. It was clear this was not a stray dog who had lived on the streets for years. This dog looked like it belonged somewhere. It had been cared for once. Its fur was still soft in places, though slightly dusty. Its eyes still carried trust, but that trust was slowly breaking. Something had happened, something recent, and something painful. The moment everything changed for the dog, around mid-morning, a small black car slowed down near the roadside. It didn't stop immediately. It hovered for a few seconds, as if the driver was thinking twice. Then it pulled over. From a distance, it looked like a normal situation. Maybe someone checking on the dog, maybe a quick rescue. But what happened next was not what anyone would expect. A door opened. A man stepped out first. He didn't look around much. He just opened the back door of the car. And that's when the dog stood up for the first time. It moved quickly. The tail wagged slightly, not out of happiness, but confusion and hope. The dog thought it was going home. It walked toward the car. But instead of being picked up, something terrible happened. The leash was removed. A second later, a bag was taken out of the car. A few objects were placed on the ground near the roadside. The dog watched carefully, still not understanding. Then both doors closed. The engine started, and the car began to move away, slowly at first, then faster. The dog ran after for a few steps, barking loudly, confused and desperate. But the car didn't stop. It kept going, until it disappeared completely down the road. And just like that, the dog had been abandoned. Confusion turns into reality. For a few seconds, the dog stood still again. It looked down the empty road. Then it looked back at the place where it had been left. It walked in small circles, trying to understand what had just happened. Dogs don't understand betrayal the way humans do, but they understand absence. They understand when someone they trust is gone, and this absence felt permanent. A nearby cyclist slowed down and watched the scene. He didn't know what to do. The dog wasn't aggressive. It wasn't dangerous. It was simply lost in emotion. The cyclist eventually moved on too, because that is how life often is. People witness things and still continue forward. But the dog remained, alone, on the roadside, under the bright morning sky. A man named Daniel enters the story. A few minutes later, another person appeared. A man named Daniel. He was an ordinary worker from the same UK town, driving to a nearby site for his job. He wasn't expecting anything unusual that day, just another routine drive. But something made him slow down. He noticed the dog sitting again, now in a slightly different position, as if it had given up on running. Daniel rolled down his window. At first, he thought the dog might be injured, but as he looked closer, he saw no visible injury, just exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, the kind that cannot be seen easily, but can be felt deeply. He parked his car a little ahead and walked back slowly. The dog watched him carefully. No barking, no fear, just silence. First contact. Daniel knelt down at a safe distance. "Hey, there, what are you doing here?" he said softly. The dog tilted its head slightly, as if trying to understand. He noticed there was no collar properly fitted anymore. only a loose strap hanging loosely, almost broken. That detail confirmed everything. This was not a lost dog. This was a dog that had been left behind. Daniel looked down the road. Nothing. No returning car. No footsteps. Just emptiness. He sighed quietly. In the UK countryside, situations like this are not common, but they are not unheard of either. Sometimes people abandon pets when life becomes complicated. Sometimes they think the road is a solution, but for the animal, there is no understanding of reasons, only loss, a decision that changes everything. Daniel had two choices. He could call animal control and continue his journey, or he could do something else, something personal, something human. The dog took a small step forward, not because it trusted him fully, but because it had nowhere else to go. Daniel slowly reached into his bag and pulled out a bottle of water he carried for work. He placed it on the ground. The dog hesitated, then approached and drank slowly. That moment changed everything. Not the situation, but the direction of the story. Because sometimes a single small act becomes the beginning of something far bigger. The roadside bomb begins. As Daniel waited, more cars passed by. Some slowed, some ignored. One even beeped slightly as if annoyed at the obstruction. But Daniel stayed. The dog slowly began to relax, sitting near him instead of standing at a distance. It was not trust yet, but it was connection. And connection is a first step away from abandonment. Daniel checked the surroundings again. No sign of the car that had left the dog. No people returning. No search. Nothing. It was clear the dog had been deliberately left there. But the question remained. Why? Something doesn't feel right. As Daniel observed the dog more closely, he noticed something unusual. The dog's behavior wasn't like a stray. It kept looking in one direction repeatedly, not randomly, but consistently, as if expecting something to return from that exact direction. That detail stayed in Daniel's mind. Dogs who have been abandoned often lose direction quickly. They search everywhere. But this dog wasn't searching everywhere. It was waiting for one specific return. That meant one thing. The dog believed it had been temporarily left, not permanently abandoned. And that belief was the most heartbreaking part. A community passing by, but not seeing. As the day continued, more people passed the roadside. A woman walking her dog slowed down, glanced at the situation, and continued walking. A delivery van stopped briefly, then drove off. A man on a phone called, didn't even look. It was a normal day in the UK. Busy roads, busy minds, but an abandoned life sitting quietly at the edge of everything. Daniel stayed longer than expected, and the dog stayed too. Two strangers. One moment, and a beginning of something no one could yet understand. The first real question. Daniel finally spoke again. Who left you here? The dog didn't answer, of course. But it turned its head slightly toward the road again. That simple movement told everything. It wasn't lost. It was waiting for someone who was not coming back. Daniel stood up slowly, looking down the road once more. This wasn't just a stray animal situation. It felt different, deeper, stranger, almost intentional in a way he couldn't yet explain. And that is where the story begins to shift. Because what Daniel didn't know yet was that this abandoned dog was not just a forgotten pet. It was connected to something far bigger. Something that would soon change everything he thought he understood about that quiet roadside moment. And what happened next would become truly unbelievable. The midday sun was now high over the UK countryside, casting long shadows along the roadside where Daniel still stood with the dog. Traffic continued as usual. People moving between towns, completely unaware that something unusual was unfolding just a few feet away from their routine world. The dog had started to calm down slightly, but its eyes still kept drifting toward the same direction on the road. That detail stayed in Daniel's mind like a warning sign he couldn't ignore. Something about this situation didn't feel random. It felt planned. A decision to stay longer. Daniel checked his watch. He was already late for work. His phone buzzed once, then again. A message from his supervisor asking where he was. But he didn't move. He looked at the dog again. The dog didn't look dangerous, aggressive, or lost in a wild way. It looked confused and emotionally drained. The kind of confusion that comes when trust is broken by someone familiar. Daniel sighed and made a choice. He replied to the message briefly, saying he had a roadside situation and would be delayed. That small decision changed the entire direction of the day. A clue on the ground. While standing near the roadside, Daniel noticed something he had missed earlier. Near where the car had stopped, there was a small torn piece of fabric lying in the grass. It looked like part of the seat cover or a blanket. Next to it was a faint mark on the ground, like something heavy had been placed and removed quickly. He walked closer. The dog followed slowly behind him. Daniel picked up the fabric piece carefully. It was clean enough to suggest it hadn't been there long. And that's when he noticed something written on it. A small stitch tag. Not a pet store label. Not a random cloth. It was a personalized veterinary tag. His expression changed slightly. This wasn't just any dog. This dog had medical history. And someone had gone to effort to remove evidence. The dog that remembered too much. Daniel knelt again near the dog. "Did someone take you from somewhere?" he said softly, more to himself than expecting an answer. The dog suddenly reacted differently. It stood up quickly, then walked a few steps toward the road again, becoming alert. Its behavior shifted instantly. This was not fear. It was recognition, as if something or someone had passed by earlier in the same direction. Daniel followed its gaze carefully. The road stretched far into the distance, empty under the bright daylight. But the dog didn't stop staring. That was the moment Daniel realized. This dog wasn't abandoned randomly. It was left in a place where it expected someone might return. A nearby shop changes everything. Daniel decided to walk a short distance down the road with the dog following closely. About 5 minutes later, they reached a small roadside shop selling drinks and snacks. An elderly shopkeeper stood behind the counter, watching them approach. Daniel asked casually, "Have you seen anyone leave a dog around here earlier today?" The shopkeeper hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, black car. Morning time. Strange mood. Didn't stay long." Daniel's attention sharpened. "Did you see what they did?" The shopkeeper looked uncomfortable. "They left something, then drove off quickly. The dog ran after them. That's all I saw." Daniel felt a knot tighten in his chest. It wasn't just abandonment. It was deliberate. A disturbing detail emerges. The shopkeeper added something after a pause. "The car looked expensive, but the people inside didn't look calm, like they were rushing." That detail changed everything, because now it wasn't just about a lost pet. It suggested pressure, or escape, or something hidden. Daniel thanked the shopkeeper and returned to the dog, who was now sitting quietly again near the roadside. It was as if the energy of waiting had become its entire identity. A sudden realization. As Daniel stood there thinking, something clicked in his mind. The dog's behavior, the medical tag, the rushed departure, the specific location where it was left. It wasn't random. This dog had likely been moved intentionally from somewhere else before being left here, and whoever left it didn't want it traced. Daniel looked at the dog again. "Who are you really?" he whispered. The dog blinked slowly. No answer came, but something in its eyes felt heavier now, like it remembered more than it was showing. An unexpected call. Daniel's phone suddenly rang. It was his sister. He almost ignored it, but answered anyway. She spoke quickly, asking why he hadn't arrived and if everything was okay. Daniel explained briefly about the dog. There was a pause. Then she said something that made him freeze, slightly. "Be careful. People sometimes abandon animals for a reason. It might not just be a stray situation." He looked at the dog again. The dog was now sitting closer than before, almost beside him, as if it had chosen him. The first attempt to leave fails. Daniel decided he needed help. He called a local animal rescue service in the UK, explaining the situation. They told him they could send someone, but it would take time due to other cases in the area. He agreed and ended the call. When he turned back, the dog had moved slightly closer to his car. Not aggressively, not desperately, but intentionally. It didn't want to stay alone anymore. Daniel opened the car door slowly. "All right, come on then," he said quietly. The dog hesitated for a few seconds, then stepped forward and climbed into back seat. It was the first time it had chosen to move away from the roadside, but even then it kept looking back, as if something wasn't finished. A journey that shouldn't have happened. Daniel began driving, slowly along the road, unsure where to take the dog temporarily. He considered the rescue center again, but part of him felt something wasn't fully understood yet. The dog sat quietly in the back seat, but its eyes kept scanning outside the window. Every passing car made it alert. Every sound made it turn its head. This was not relaxation. This was memory, as if it was waiting for a specific vehicle, a specific person, or a specific moment. The strange connection deepens. After about 15 minutes of driving, something unexpected happened. The dog suddenly stood up in the back seat. It started barking loudly. Daniel immediately slowed the car. "What is it?" he said, confused. The dog was staring at a silver car passing in the opposite direction for just a few seconds. Then it disappeared. But the reaction was immediate and intense. The dog stopped barking and sat down again, shaken. Daniel's mind raced. That reaction was not random. The dog recognized something, or someone. The truth is still missing. Daniel realized the situation was far more complicated than he first thought. This wasn't just abandonment. It was connection, recognition, and separation. Someone had left this dog on purpose, but not without history, and not without emotion. The dog was carrying something unspoken, something tied to its past life. And now, Daniel had unknowingly become part of that story. As he drove forward, he understood one thing clearly. This was only the beginning of something much bigger, and what would be revealed next would shock him even more than the roadside moment itself. The afternoon light stretched across the UK countryside as Daniel continued driving with the dog, sitting quietly in the back seat. The road was less busy now, but the silence inside the car felt heavier than the traffic outside. The dog wasn't restless anymore. It was watching, carefully, like it was waiting for something to be confirmed. Daniel kept thinking about everything he had seen so far. The rushed abandonment, the medical tag, the reaction to passing cars. None of it made sense on its own, but together it pointed towards something hidden beneath the surface. Something intentional, something emotional, and something unfinished. A stop that reveals a new clue. Daniel decided to pull over near a small service area. He needed answers, or at least a direction. He stepped out of the car and opened the back door slightly. The dog followed him immediately, staying close this time instead of hesitating. Inside the service area shop, Daniel bought a bottle of water and asked the cashier a simple question. "Have you seen a dog like this before, maybe in the past few days?" The cashier looked at the dog for a moment. Then his expression changed slightly. "Yes, I think so. There was a woman, older car. She used to come here with a dog that looked very similar." Daniel's attention sharpened. "Used to?" The cashier nodded. "She hasn't come for days. People said she might have moved away." Daniel thanked him and walked back outside. The pieces were starting to form, but not clearly enough yet. The name that changes the story. Back in the car, Daniel noticed something stuck under the passenger seat cover. He reached carefully and pulled it out. It was a small folded card. A veterinary appointment reminder. The name printed on it made everything pause for a moment. "Bella." Daniel looked at the dog in the back seat. "Bella," he repeated softly. The dog reacted instantly. It turned its head sharply toward him. Not fear, recognition. This was not just a stray. This was a named pet, a family pet, a remembered life, a painful realization. Daniel sat still for a moment, holding the card. Now it made sense. The medical tag, the behavior, the reaction cars, the waiting near the roadside. Bella hadn't been randomly abandoned. She had been separated from someone she knew, but not in a simple way. It felt rushed, emotional, like something forced. Daniel looked at her again. "Where did they take you from?" he asked quietly. Bella didn't answer, but she didn't look away this time either. The silver car returns in memory. Suddenly, Bella stood up again in the back seat. Alert, focused. Daniel stopped the car immediately. "What is it now?" he said. This time, there was no passing vehicle nearby, no noise, but Bella was staring forward intensely. Then slowly, she sat down again, calmer, but different. It was as if she had remembered something. Not seen it, remembered it. Daniel realized something deeper. The dog wasn't just reacting to the present. It was reliving fragments of its past. A call from the rescue team. Daniel's phone rang again. The animal rescue team was finally calling back. They asked for his exact location and details. He explained everything, including the name Bella and the tag. There was a short silence on the other end. Then the responder said something unexpected. "That name, we might have a record. Stay where you are." Daniel frowned. What kind of record? But the line already shifted into another tone. Professional. Serious. Please wait for our team. This might not be a simple stray case. The call ended. Daniel slowly lowered his phone. And for the first time that day, he felt that the situation had moved beyond chance. The arrival of the rescue team. About an hour later, a small rescue van arrived at the roadside. 2 staff members stepped out. They approached carefully, observing Bella. The moment they saw her, one of them paused. "I think this is her," he said quietly. Daniel looked confused. "You know her?" The rescuer nodded slowly. She was reported missing from a private property a few days ago. Not stolen, but removed during a family separation situation. Daniel stayed silent. The rescuer continued. The family split up. One side took her. The other didn't agree with it. There were arguments, confusion, and then she disappeared. Daniel looked down at Bella. Now it made sense. Not abandonment in the usual sense, but emotional displacement. The decision no one expected. The rescue team prepared to take Bella safely. But something unexpected happened. When they tried to guide her toward the van, Bella hesitated. She didn't resist, but she didn't move easily either. She turned back and looked at Daniel. Long, still, like she was making a choice. Daniel didn't say anything at first. He just stood there. Then he knelt slightly and spoke softly. "You'll be safe, don't worry." A few seconds passed. Then Bella slowly walked toward the rescue team. Not because she forgot Daniel, but because she finally felt guided again. The final moment. As the van doors closed, Bella looked through the small window one last time. Daniel stood by the roadside, the same place where everything had begun. The dog that had been left behind was no longer abandoned, but the memory of that moment would stay, because it wasn't just about rescue. It was about understanding what happens when trust breaks between humans, and how silently animals carry that pain. The van started moving slowly down the road, and then it was gone. After everything, Daniel remained standing for a while. The road was quiet again. Cars passed like normal. People continued their day like nothing had happened. But for him, something had changed. He had seen how quickly a life could be left behind, and how unexpectedly it could be found again, not with noise, not with drama, but with patience and attention. Final twist, what no one knew. A few days later, Daniel received a small letter from the rescue center. Inside was an update about Bella. She had been reunited with the original family member who had been searching for her all along. But there was one final note written at the bottom. Bella kept waiting at the roadside because that was the last place she saw them together. She didn't understand separation. She only understood waiting. Daniel read that line twice, then quietly folded the letter, because now he understood something deeper than the story itself. Sometimes animals don't get abandoned by cruelty alone. Sometimes they get left behind by confusion, human decisions, and broken connections they never agreed to. And they still wait, even when the world has already moved on. End of story. Sometimes the most unbelievable stories don't come from what happens to us, but from what we fail to notice happening to those who trust us completely.